Last year, I kind of sat down with ChatGPT on an idle Friday and said, got some time today. What should I do? And within a few minutes, I was investigating. I was looking at Yelp reviews for foie gras sales in California, and obviously, foie gras is banned in California. And the same name kept popping up. It was Wild Fork Foods, and I'd never heard of this Wild Fork Foods. But several reviews for sale of foie gras at Wild Fork Foods in California. And I thought this is odd. I looked more into it, and Wild Fork Foods is owned by JBS, the world's largest meat processing company. And so, sure, I went to my local Wild Fork food store and saw, sure enough, foie gras was for sale. Not only that, it had the establishment number, the USDA meat inspection number, and we could trace it back to a farm in upstate New York called La Belle Patrimone, which is a well-known supplier of foie gras from force-fed birds. And sure enough, we sent our director of investigations out, Scott, the next Monday, and he filmed himself purchasing foie gras at 11 different stores in California, at Wild Fork food stores. So the world's largest meat company was breaking the law, selling foie gras. And sure enough, we contacted the authorities. We're hoping that the California Attorney General is going to pursue charges in this case. But the reason I tell this story is because that didn't take any degree of training or much undercover footage. It was just somebody noticing something and pulling at a thread and saying this doesn't feel right. So if anyone does want to be an investigator, sometimes all you have to do is take a bit of notice, read the packages in the meat store, and just do a little sniffing around, and you could find something untoward just like that.
Could we just talk about the Yelp review part of this
Yeah.
story? Like, what? That's bananas. You're just sitting there like on an app. Also, the ChatGPT part of this story, like every part of this story is sort of blowing my mind a little bit. Wow. I remember like right at the very beginning of our hen house, we interviewed an undercover investigator. And I this was like 2010 maybe. And I obviously there had been investigations before then as well, though since then they've really exploded. It wasn't like as common. Uh, and I remember one of the things he mentioned, and this is such a tiny piece of the interview, it's like nothing sauce, is that he had to eat meat in the lunchrooms. And then like eventually he would start to like switch it to tofurkey or something, but he didn't want to do anything to, stand out. And I he also said some other things that are so much more alarming than that about the treatment of the animals and like what became considered normal even to him, even though he had the ethos of an animal rights activist. But for some reason, it was like that piece of it that, I always think of. Because I think a lot of people who would want to get involved with undercover investigative work in this particular area would be like, this would be for the greater good. I can do this. I can film this. I'm not scared. Da, 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 da. And then it's like, oh, but you have to have a meat sandwich at lunch. And they'd be like, I'm out. I don't actually have a question in that, Ben. That story has always really stuck with me, which reminds me of the importance of using storytelling as your colleague is doing.
Yeah, and I think, from the undercover investigators, how I've been told that they deal with it is to basically build a different persona. You're not yourself when you're in the field. You're this person, and you eat meat, and you can stand by and watch people abusing animals, and that's kind of how you deal with it. But as I say, some people, there was a question in the chat which we might come to, but saying how long can you, in theory, you can be in the field for forever. If you enjoy the nomadic lifestyle, moving around, and you want to get a lot. There are some very seasoned investigators who have been doing it for 20 years, but that's the minority of people. The majority of people last one or two investigations and then and say, thank you very much.
I just was wondering how many of them are women at this point, because I know that was pretty it was very few back in the day, but I think that's shifted. Am I right?
There were both male and female investigators. Yeah. I think it's I wouldn't say it's an even split, but there's every walk of life can be an investigator, and that's one of the things. Anyone could be an investigator. There's a certain mentality that kind of can stick it out, but you don't have to have many prerequisites to be an undercover investigator, which means the pool is really big, but you do have to be very mentally strong.
Before we let you go, I wanted to get into the fact that in addition to being known widely for really outstanding undercover investigations, Animal Outlook is known for legal advocacy. And we are big fans and old friends of Piper Hoffman, who is your director of legal advocacy. So, can you just tell us a little bit about your strategy? Just the same way I asked about which undercover investigations do you do? What legal efforts? Do you have a certain theme? Do you have a certain goal in mind that you want to pursue? Because there's a whole lot of things you could do, and they're all extremely time consuming and I'm sure resource intensive once you choose to go in a certain direction. So, can you just tell us a little bit of your strategy and what's on the current docket?
Yeah, so it's actually Piper's last day today. She's
Oh
leaving
no!
Animal Outlook and moving on to staying within the animal protection movement, I'm delighted to say, and not going too far. But we'll miss her. She's been with Animal Outlook for 5 years. But this is in way of an advert. If this episode goes out before we've closed the recruitment field, we are recruiting for a new senior director of legal advocacy. But I'm sure Piper and whoever steps into the position will say the same thing. What they look for, or what we look for in cases, is what's going to move the needle, what's going to be replicable, what's going to be scalable. Because just going after individual workers for committing crimes against animals on factory farms, it's not going to move the needle. We need to get replicable models of litigation that the private sector can pick up in class action lawsuits, for example, where there's a monetary incentive for private legal firms to get involved in animal protection issues, and also start holding companies account. Far too often it's the lowest workers down in the chain who are the ones who take the brunt of the policies of the company. So what we look for is where we can hold the actual integrators and the companies accountable for the crimes that are committed on their watch. So yeah, it's scalable, it's replicable, and it's needle moving. You're right. There are so many enforcement possibilities, but that's really what we look for when we decide whether or not to pick a case.
Anything in particular you'd like to highlight?
Yeah, I think one really interesting one that I was really grateful to work with Piper on at the end was a case against a Pennsylvania egg company called Alderfer Eggs. So Alderfer Eggs, they were marketing as free roaming. The eggs were from free roaming birds. And so what we actually did in that case was we flew a drone over the walls of these various suppliers for Alderfer Eggs and found that the majority of birds never went outside, and they only had access to a wire porch that was suspended kind of above the air, and very few birds were actually using the wire porch. So then we took those photos and we surveyed, and this was all Piper, that we surveyed the likely customers for Alderfer Eggs in the Northeast United States and showed them these photos and said, do you think these birds are free roaming? And overwhelmingly, I think it was something like 80%, they said, no, those birds aren't free roaming. So we used all of that as the evidence base to then sue Alderfer Egg for false advertising. And we won a $280,000 settlement. And not only that, obviously, they had to remove the free roaming claims from the packages. So that's an example of great use of drone technology to get over those. We don't have to have glass walls anymore because we can get above the walls, and great use of surveys and consumer focus groups to kind of understand whether consumers are being misled. And so that's a model that any company that's making humanely raised or free roaming, free range, we can now use that in different parts of the country, different products, and really go after a lot of those humane washing claims.
I love it. Like, I can't believe that only 80 something percent said they thought that was free roaming. Like,
Yeah,
that's
I don't know what
totally
the other
not free
20%
roaming.